Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining me for this session. As you can see, this is the science of vocal harmony, and my name is Fred Cyril, and I've put this together for you, and we're going to be talking about some things that I think are really interesting. So we're going to be talking about harmonics, overtones, chords, tuning, and lots of other very nerdy, but I think very interesting things. Now, don't worry if you haven't got a scientific or mathematical background. That's completely okay, and not in the slightest an issue. And likewise, if you aren't a massive music theory nerd like myself, that's also completely fine. This should be approachable for everybody. So with me today, I've got my keyboard with me. So hopefully you heard that. And I'm also going to be playing several examples. I'm going to be showing you some pictures. And yeah, our goal today is to ask some questions and also answer them using my favourite thing, science. So let's start off with talking about pitches and waves. And the very first question that we need to ask ourselves is, what is a pitch? Well, a pitch is a sound wave, and we measure these in wavelengths per second. So we call the number of wavelengths per second, we call this frequency, and we measure it in hertz. Not hertz as in, ow, that's painful, although you may say that if someone's singing badly, or if a soprano is singing very high, sorry sopranos, but hertz as in a man called Hertz that came up with it, I think. So when we're talking about pitches, we're talking about sound waves and the frequency of these sound waves. Now, as you may know, a higher pitch is going to have a higher frequency, and a lower pitch, this is going to have a lower frequency. Okay? And the human ear, we can hear between about 20 to 20,000 hertz, give or take. Obviously, it depends slightly on your age and who you are, but roughly 20 to 20,000 hertz. Now, dogs can hear much higher frequencies, for example. Some animals can hear even other sort of crazy frequencies, but this is where we're sort of sitting as humans. I'll just play you now. So some human voices can sing super low and super high. We've got quite a nice spectrum of the ranges we can sing in. I'll just play you a couple of examples of, just so we can sort of hear. So we're going to play a low voice and a high voice. So first of all, this is going to be a low voice. So this is a man called Jeff from the a cappella group Voice Play. And he's going to be singing right down to an F1, which is a very low note, all the way down here. So I'll just play you that.
You cannot reason with a headless man.
So I think you'd agree that was pretty damn low. And now on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'll play you a high voice. So this is going to be a lady called Diana Damrau, and she's going to be singing the Queen of the Night aria, which you may be familiar with. It's from the Mozart opera Magic Flute. And this goes all the way up to an F6, a high F. So that's all the way up here. Very high. So we'll just play that. So I think you'd agree, a bit of difference there between those two. But that's the kind of range we're working in, and we're thinking about the human voice. So this session is about vocal harmony. So we're thinking about the human voice. So as you can see, even though we can sing quite near to the lowest frequencies the human ear can hear, However, the highest pitches that a human can sing, I mean, that was about 1,400 hertz, which is very, very high. You know, that piece is famous for being very, very high. But, you know, humans can hear up to 20,000 hertz, which is a lot bigger than 1,400. So what's going on there? So if I go to the next slide, we're going to get a picture. So here on the left, we've got a picture of a computer-generated sine wave. Okay, so this is just a pure sound at 440 hertz, which is the note A. On the right, we've got a human singing that exact same note. And then on the side there, those are the frequencies of the sound being picked up. So you can see that the computer sound is just producing that 440 hertz frequency, just that wave. But if you look on the right, the human voice, there's loads of other stuff going on. You've still got, you can still clearly see right at the bottom there, they're singing that note, but there's other stuff going on. And it's going well past that 1400 hertz we were talking about for that really high note, well into the 6, 7, 8 Ks, right? All the way up into the sort of the highest pitches a human can hear. And that is what makes the human voice unique. So I'm going to play you now just a quick clip. So this is a group singing some Gregorian chant in a church. I just want you to listen. Obviously, listen to the pitches that they're singing, but also as it reverberates around the church, listen to those sounds that are above it and the timbre, the sort of the sound that creates. Listen to those kind of higher pitches floating around in the church. So I'll just play that for you now. It's about 30 seconds. Yeah, so obviously, so their last note was around there. But you may have heard these higher notes sort of floating around there, and that timbre is what makes a human voice so unique. And so we're going to be coming back to this idea of all this picture, and we're going to explain what these are. So move on to the next slide. So harmonics. So what are harmonics? Well, you may think, it's another name for a mouth organ. It's a silly instrument for children. And no, that's a harmonica, almost the same. But these are harmonics. So usually, when we're listening to a pitch, to someone singing, we're just hearing one pitch, right? So if I'm to sing, you're going to be hearing. But actually, there's lots of frequencies going on there at once. This is not the only pitch my body is producing when I sing that. So the fundamental is what we call the note that I'm singing. But then, because of the way that sound passes through our bodies, and in particular our oral cavity up here, there are higher, weaker frequencies in the sound called harmonics. Lots and lots of very clever physics that goes on. And it's basically to do with sound waves bouncing off each other inside the face. And so there are lots of higher, weaker frequencies as well, and these are called harmonics. So that's what we saw in that picture earlier, if you remember. Those higher, weaker frequencies, those are called the harmonics. Now, the harmonic frequencies, so you may ask, well, what are the harmonics? And the harmonic frequencies are just the multiples of the fundamental frequency, of the frequency you're singing. So, for example, if one was to sing this note A, which I've labelled number 1, that's 55 hertz. And then the harmonic frequencies will be all the multiples of that. So 2 times 55 hertz is 110 hertz, which happens to be an A as well. 3 times 55 is 165, which is an E. 4 times 55 is 220, which is the A above that. And so on. We get a C sharp, an E, a G, an A, and then and so on. You can see sort of and so on. Okay, you get the idea. And all these harmonic frequencies, these are all just the multiples of 55. Now, the exact amplitude of the harmonics in a voice, this depends on lots of things, one of them being the vowel someone sings. So, for example, if you're in a choir or a quartet, you may have been spoken to about vowel matching. And you can hear that different vowels sound differently. For example, if I'm to sort of sing, you can hear a weird kind of sound there compared to which sounds quite dead. And that's because I'm manipulating those higher frequencies. Versus now obviously that sounds weird and I sort of sound a bit like an alien. But you may sort of see what I mean there. So the higher harmonics are less prominent if someone sings breathily, and they're more prominent in particular if someone sings with resonance. So you may have been told, or you probably have been told, to sing with resonance. And what does that mean? Well, all that means is amplifying those higher harmonics. Okay, that's what good singing sounds like. And we'll speak later about why it's important to sing with resonance, especially when we're singing harmony. So we want to sing with resonance. I'll show you a picture in a second. And this is going to show you a singer with resonance and a singer singing breathily, and the frequencies in their sound. And we can compare and contrast these. So on the left, we've got a resonant voice, and on the right is a breathy voice singing that same note, that pitch A. Oh, it's actually that one. And so you can see that the pitches at the bottom, very similar, right? Those two kind of red, white lines at the bottom, very similar. But then, as the harmonics go higher, when we're around the kind of the 3K range, the resonant voice, those harmonics around the 3K range, they're pretty big still. And the breathy voice, they're kind of almost dying out. And you can see how much more prominent the harmonics are in that resonant voice. Okay, those higher, weaker frequencies in the sound are much more prominent in that resonant voice compared to that breathy voice. So now we've spoken about pitch, waves. Now we can start thinking about what happens when we get two voices. So when we have two voices singing at the same time, the harmonics of each voice starts to interact, and this is why we care about singing resonantly. So the way the harmonics interact, this kind of characterizes how we feel when we're hearing those intervals. You may have heard the words consonant and dissonant, and we're going to sort of talk about why certain intervals are consonant and dissonant, and it's all to do with the way that the waves interact. It's all to do with science, hence the name of the session. So here are the intervals. There's lots of them. I just thought I'd flash them up. So there's loads of different types of intervals. So these are all the intervals starting from C. We've got a semitone, major second, all these kind of intervals, and then for our octave, these are our nice intervals. So let's speak first about some consonant intervals. So consonant intervals are those that share harmonic frequencies, and this amplifies their partials via constructive interference. So partials just means the higher frequencies. So constructive interference, this is a physics thing, and basically what this means is when you've got two waves traveling in the same direction, if they both peak at the same time, those peaks kind of add on to each other to create a sort of super peak. And if one has a peak and one has what's called a trough, which is the opposite of the peak, they cancel each other out. Okay, so when two constant intervals, if they have lots of harmonic frequencies that are common, then what happens is their waves kind of add on to each other and make one kind of big super wave, which sounds even cooler. So a perfect unison, as in just the same note, is going to be perfectly consonant because all the harmonic frequencies are the same. Now, perfect fifths and perfect fourths, they have a lot of similar harmonic frequencies, major thirds and major sixths, and have quite a few as well. So, for example, this is an example of a perfect fifth. So we've got the harmonic series of a C and a G. So the notes in the harmonic series of C, as you can see there, we've got a C, as you can see there, pun intended, C, C, G, C, E, G, B flat, C. And then the notes in the series of G. But you can see that the third note in the series of C, which is a G, which is this G in fact, that's the same as the second note in the harmonic series of G. And likewise, the sixth note in the harmonic series of C is the same as the fourth note in the harmonic series of G. So why do we care about that? Well, it means that when they interact with each other, they sound cool. So generally, they have neat and simple ratios between the two fundamental pitch frequencies. Okay, and a perfect fifth is a very, very nice ratio. Perfect fifth is always going to be a ratio of 3 to 2. The frequencies have 3 to 2. So for example, if we have an A, and then we have an E, that E is going to be 3 to 2. It's going to be 50% more on the frequency. So here, for example, 440 and 660. That makes our perfect fifth. And that's quite a nice simple ratio, 3 to 2. And so I've just got a picture there of what that looks like, of those waves. So in the blue, we've got the waves of E, and in the red, we've got the waves of A. And you can see how 3 waves of E lines up with 2 waves of A because of that nice simple ratio. And that means that when they interact with each other, they form this pattern, which is quite stable. It's nice and symmetrical, and it repeats pretty often, and it's very stable and it's very sort of consonant. So I'll play you now just an example of a perfect fifth, and really just listen to how nicely the 2 notes just sort of sit with each other. And they've really, they aren't fighting against each other at all. They're very sympathetic to one another, these 2 notes, and they're really just intertwining to make one lovely sound, one beautiful wave pattern. So I'll just play you a little clip now. So that was a nice perfect fifth. So yeah, so you can hear, and that's why that interval of perfect fifth is very nice. And when you play 2 notes that are perfect fifth apart together, it sounds pretty nice, No, that sounds nice and harmonious. So yeah, in contrast, so those were our nice intervals. In contrast, we have dissonant intervals. So dissonant intervals have much more complex ratios, and therefore the harmonic series and the harmonic frequencies, they overlap a lot less. So yeah, dissonant intervals, I've characterized them here as sounding grating, as if they're in some sort of fight to the death. So the classic example is the tritone, which fans of the musical West Side Story or the Simpsons may recognise. If you play a tritone at the same time, sounds pretty gross. And that has a frequency ratio of 45 to 32 or 64 to 45, depending on your tuning preference. I'll speak more about tuning in a second. But yeah, so you can see how that ratio is a lot uglier than the lovely 3 to 2 we had earlier. And there are some other dissonant intervals as well, the major seventh and the minor second. So I'll play you just some voices singing a couple of these, just so you can really get a feel for it. So I apologise in advance for these. They sound pretty horrible, but they're meant to be. So yeah, so first of all, here is 2 voices singing a tritone. And next, here is 2 voices singing a minor second. Oh, that one especially just makes you shudder, doesn't it? And you compare that to our perfect fifth. Right, that one's not uncomfortable. I can listen to that all day. But the other ones, they sound really, grating and uncomfortable. That minor second, that semitone clash, and it's all to do again with science and with waves and with ratios and maths. So that is the example for when we've got a tritone, when those waves interfere with each other, the pattern. And yeah, if you look closely, you can see there is absolutely no repetition going on there. It's not in the slightest a stable pattern. It's messy and it's unwieldy. And this is why that interval doesn't sound good. Because when the waves interact with each other, it's just so stubborn and unique, and I don't like it. Great. So that's our discussion of intervals. Let's talk a bit about tuning. So as we've seen, we can think about perfect fifths as being 2 frequencies that have a ratio of 3 to 2. So if I was to play this note and I increase its frequency by 50%, I get to this note. And I can increase the frequency of 50% again, and I get up another perfect fifth. and another, and another, and another, and so on, right? That's how you get a perfect fifth. And you can do this for all the other intervals. So for example, a major third is the ratio of 5 to 4. So if I was to play an A at 440 hertz, if I do a 5 to 4, that means that our major third is going to be 550 hertz. That's our nice major third, which takes us to a C sharp. So we can think about all our intervals in terms of ratios. But there is a problem. So for example, if we start with that A, and we go up at major third, we get to C sharp. Okay? But then we can keep doing that. And we arrive at A equals 859.375 hertz. Right, so if we keep going up 3 major thirds. So I'm just using that nice ratio 3 times. But that's an issue. We know that our A should be at 880 hertz. Right? We know that when we have octaves, that should be doubling the frequency. So if this A is 440, our next should be 880. So actually, when we stack these major thirds using our ratios, we're flat. So it sounds like this. Sorry, so A. Gross. We're flat. So what's going on? And what can we do to fix it? So unfortunately, there isn't much we can do to fix it. What we need to do is come up with a compromise. And the one we're most likely to hear is equal temperament. So this keyboard that I've been playing, this is an equally tempered keyboard. So pianos and keyboards, they're going to have equal temperament. And indeed, all instruments where there are just different notes you can play, these are going to have equal temperament. Okay? So equal temperament involves taking an octave. So for example, I'm going to divide it into 12 equal sections. So okay, that's our 12 equal sections in the octave. So every semitone is the same ratio. And in particular, this is the 12th root of 2, for those of you that are mathematically inclined. So this is a compromise. The intervals that we get from equal temperament are very close to the ones we get from our lovely ratios, but they're not exactly the same. Okay? However, this is a compromise that we generally have to make, because if we didn't, things would get very, very, very difficult, right? So the issue is that, so when we sing a cappella harmony, we're going to be tuning chords. We're going to be using the ratios from before, the nice, simple, neat ratios that give us the best chords, because those give us the most harmonic amplification, those neat ratios, and they create that lock and ring sound that we love to hear, and they give us the best chords. So, for example, if you were singing a C major chord, you were singing a C like that. But if you were singing, say, an F major chord, the C might be very slightly different, because when you pitch a C as a perfect fifth up from an F, that's slightly different from just pitching that C. And for example, if you're singing a C in an A flat major chord, that C is now the major third. So a major third up from an A flat is not exactly the same as that C in the C major chord. And likewise, if you were to sing a C as the minor seventh in a D7 chord, that C is again not going to be exactly the same. Now, they're going to be very similar, but they're not exactly the same frequency. And this is where we use our ears. Because when we're singing harmony, we're using our ears and we're tuning by ear, right? But this is why we have to make the compromise of equal temperament for when we're talking about music, writing music, and playing music. Because otherwise, we'd need like 12 different versions of every note. So we wouldn't just have one C. We'd have like all these tiny different versions of C. For example, we have 12 different versions of every note, and you can imagine the space that would take up, right? Like, that's just not realistic, and it's a massive headache. So what we do is we make this compromise. So we divide our octave into 12 equal things. And this means that most of the time, equal temperament, which is what that's called when we divide it into 12 equal sections, that's generally pretty good. And it's always pretty close to the ratios. And in particular, octaves are always completely right with equal temperament, because we start by getting an octave as double the frequency. But it is a compromise. So later, when we're talking about chords, I will be talking about the frequency ratios. But bear in mind that the frequency ratios only matter when we're talking about harmony. Okay? It's not always true to say, for example, that a C is going to be a perfect fifth up from an F. Because if that C is the major third in an A flat major chord, then that C that you would sing if you're going a perfect fifth up from an F, that's going to be slightly different in frequency to the C that you'd sing if you're going up a major third from an A flat. So when we're singing, we're always tuning by ear, and we do these tiny adjustments naturally, and that's what allows our chords to sound nice. So hopefully that hasn't confused you too much, but I just thought it was a useful aside about tuning systems. So now we're going back to our harmony, and we're going to now be speaking about 3 voices. So when we had a third voice, we can move from talking about intervals when we had 2 voices to now we can talk about chords. In particular, we can talk about triads. I don't mean kind of the mafia in is it no, it's not. Is it China when they have triads? I don't know. Please don't hurt me. But triads is as in a 3-part chord. Triads. I've got a picture here of 3 gentlemen singing. You may recognise these 3 gentlemen, by the way. These are the 3 tenors with Placido Domingo, Pavarotti, and the other one. So, the major triad. Well, an absolutely classic chord, and probably like the first chord that most people will come across and will hear. But how the hell did we come up with a major triad? Well, do you remember that harmonic series we were talking about? The major triad is built up from the pitches we find in the first 6 frequencies. And we often think about this as being the most stable chord. So I've got a picture here of the harmonic series of a C. And if you look, we've got C, C, G, C, E, G in the first 6. So basically the first 3 different notes we find is a C, an E, and a G. And we stick those together, and what you get? C major. That's how we come up with the major chord. And that's why the major chord sounds so pleasant, so stable. Because we've basically engineered it to sound that way. Because those notes are already in the harmonic series of C, those E and that E and that G are already in the harmonic series of C, it's basically guaranteed to overlap nicely when all those waves start doing funny wave things. But there are different ways to have a C major chord. So we're going to talk now about inversions. So let's say we're going to keep our pitches constant. So we're going to stay with just the notes C, E, and G. But we can change the order in which they're arranged. So for example, we could play that's C, E, G, or we could play E, G, C, or we could play G, C, E, or there's loads and loads of different ways we can play those 3 notes, and these can affect how a chord sounds. So these different pitch orderings, these are called inversions. And inversions are just identified by their lowest note. So when we're talking about an inversion, we just care about which note's on the bottom. And we can measure the stability of every inversion, from the distance from the lowest note in the chord to the lowest harmonic that it shares with another note in the chord. That's lots of words, but we'll do some pictures and examples so you'll see what I mean. If we take a root position triad, so root position is where the root of the chord is the lowest note. So for example, if we were playing a C major chord, that would mean that we have our C as our lowest note. That's our root position. That's kind of our default inversion. So that sounds like this. And that's a little picture for you there as well. So C, E, and G. And as you can see, C is on the bottom. But have a look here. If we look at the harmonic series of C, E, and G, then the first time that we share a harmonic is when that third note in the harmonic series of C, that G, is shared with the second note in the series of G, that G, which is 13 scale degrees above that lowest note C. So that note C where the chord is starting, and that note they're sharing is up here. And that's 13 scale degrees away. So, I'll play you now just some people singing a major chord in root position. So you can hopefully just hear that, the way that those pitches are stacked up, and that in particular, the root of the triad is on the bottom. So that's our root position major triad. And we said 13 scale degrees between the lowest note in the chord, that C, and the first time that overlaps with the harmonic series from somewhere else. Now, if we move our C up an octave, so that C, take it up an octave, we get a first inversion chord. So we're now stacked on scale degree 3. So we call E the third of the C major chord. So this is the first inversion chord, this is called. And now if we look at that same picture as before, this time it takes us 20 scale degrees to go from that low E at the bottom of the chord up to the first time that it shares something in the harmonic series. So that lowest note of the chord, and it doesn't share until quite a big distance. So that one we characterise as being less stable for that reason. So I'll just play you now a sung first inversion chord. Yeah. And now no point to guessing what comes next. Now I get a second inversion chord. So now we put the E up an octave as well. We get a C major chord with a G on the bottom, and G is the fifth of C major. So like this. So that G is the lowest note. And now let's look at the same picture as before, but this time in that order. Well, when do we first share a harmonic? Well, if you look, the first time it shares is that G, which is 2 octaves above the lowest note in the chord, 16 scale degrees above the lowest note in the chord. So I'll just play you a second inversion triad as well. Cool. So, well, what does this all mean? Well, we can see the root position is the most stable, okay, because it's only 13 scale degrees between that lowest note in the chord when it's in root position and the shared harmonic. Then the next most stable is the second inversion, and finally the first inversion. So this is why most songs end on root position triads, and why you won't find many first inversion triads in barbershop. You know, if you imagine, for example, if I'm playing a bit of music, I'm doing then you want to go back to right. Whereas if you ended on say that's a C major chord, doesn't sound right, does it? Compare that to and the difference is that lowest note. So that's why we characterize root position triads as being the most stable. Then second inversion, and then first inversion. So yeah, you won't find many first inversion triads in barbershop styles. But these are rules of thumb, and they're not guidelines. This is just the way to explain and understand the phenomena we experience via science. So yeah, composers and arrangers, sorry, may well use first inversion triads, and they may well end on a non-root position chord. And if you want an example of this, listen to any of Simon's arrangements. He is allergic to root position triads, and he does not care for the usual conventions of how to voice a chord. And for that, I do respect him for that. But yeah, so I'm just going to play you now the three different inversions, one after the other. So we're going to start from most to least stable. So we'll start with root position, then we'll go to second inversion, and then first inversion, and just listen how the quality of the chord is changed just by which notes on the bottom. So first of all, root position. Great. Now second inversion. And finally first inversion. So all three of those are exactly the same collection of pitches, but just in a different order. Great. So now that brings us on to our next topic, which is chord spelling. I don't mean C-H-O-R-D, although that is how you spell chord. But in the same way that you spell words using letters in the right order, you spell chords using notes in a certain order. So that's what chord spelling means. Chord spelling just means the order of notes in the chord. So in our root position chord, which we spell C-E-G, that E there, it doesn't actually reinforce any of the harmonics of the C or the G until 2 octaves up. So it's not helping much with the stability of the chord. However, if we take that E, move it up an octave, exactly the same harmonic frequencies are amplified, but they're now much louder. So you compare to... So that's why often we like to have thirds higher in our chords rather in the middle. So I'll just play you now a sung version. So this first one is going to be a major chord in the sort of the collapsed version. So it's going to be 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5 with the third in the middle of the chord. Great, and then contrast that to what happens when we put that third up an octave. Now this is a major chord spelled 1, 5, 3. It sounds a lot sort of shinier and more expanded because those harmonics are more amplified. So that's why we often have thirds at the top of our chords rather than in the middle. Cool. So that was a bit of talking about 3 voices, and now what happens when we get 4 voices? Well, 4 voices is a previous BHS International Champion Quartet, but it's also just a way to talk about 4 people singing. And when we add a 4th voice to our harmony, we have more options. So I'm only going up to 4 voices in this presentation because most styles of harmony that we'll probably sing a 4 voice harmony. So for example, SATB or barbershop, these are all 4-part harmony. Obviously, you can have more part harmony, but I had to stop somewhere. But 4-part harmony is kind of the standard, and you can look back at all the things that someone like Bach has done, and he was writing 4-part chorales and that sort of thing, and loads of Western music is based on 4-part harmony. By the way, if you want more about the history of music, myself and Simon are doing a session about the history of music, although I think that might have already happened. Well, it hasn't happened yet because I'm recording this on the 28th of August, but it might have already happened by the time you're watching this. Okay, so when we add 4 voices, we have more options than before. So before, all we had was triads, but now we can do more things. So we can do something called octavization. Now, octavization, that's not the new villain in the next Transformers movie, although it definitely could be. Octavization is something we'll talk about in a second. And we can also do 4-part chords, so chords with 4 different notes. So I've just got a little picture here of four gentlemen. You may recognise these gentlemen. This is the Newfangled Four. One of my favourite, actually my number one favourite barbershop quartet. Unfortunately, they're not singing together anymore. But these are the gentlemen that got me into barbershop singing, which is why I met Simon, why I came into the collective, and why I'm now on the music team talking to you about vocal harmony. So you've got these gentlemen to thank for this person waffling at you. So thanks, Newfangled Four. So four voices. So the first thing we can do when we've got four voices is something called octavization. So this is where the fourth voice is going to be singing the same pitch as someone else, but in a different octave. So if you remember before, when we had a triad, major triads, we had 1, 3, 5, like C, E, G, for example. So if we're going to octavize it, we're going to sing one of those pitches again in a different octave. So usually, octavization, this reinforces the harmonics of the lower pitch, because pitches that are an octave apart, they have the same harmonic series, obviously an octave apart. So that can reinforce those harmonics. So I've got an example here of two C's in octave. So like that. So in blue are the notes that are being sung. Blue is the two C's. And now in red are the notes that they share in their harmonic series. So on the left, you've got the harmonic series of that low C. On the right, the harmonic series of the higher C. And then in red, I've labelled all the ones that are shared. And you can see there's quite a lot that are shared between the two. So I'll play you now just how that sounds. So yeah, just listen to see if you can find those higher harmonics when these two pitches lock in. So I'll just play you now that octavized audio. So you can hopefully hear that what's going on is that. But you may be able to also pick out those higher pitches that are being amplified. That you know. Right, I'll just play that again. Just see if you can listen out for those higher pitches that are kind of floating around at the top there when they lock in. They are faint, but they're there. They're hard to pick out when you hear it, but that's what makes that sound so good. And so this picture explains what's going on there. So as you can see, our two C's, in blue are the two notes we're singing, but in red are the notes that are shared from the harmonic series. And that's why having things in octaves makes things a lot more powerful. So yeah, you can see what's going on there. And there's loads and loads of shared frequencies. So we can octavize our triads. It's like an upgrade. So we can double a pitch in the chord in octaves. And this will allow four voices to sing major triads, which sound a lot more expansive and a lot better. And in general, we're going to double the root of our triad. Because this is going to mean that we're maximizing the harmonics being amplified. So here's an example of a major triad sung by four voices. So the root is going to be sung in 2 octaves. And so listen out for that. And listen how that sounds wider and more expansive than our triad from before. So I'll play you now this 4-voice version of a major chord. Yeah, and if you compare that to the one we had earlier with just 3 voices. Yeah, that's 3 voices. When we have that root and we have it sung again in another octave. Yeah, that sounds nice and thick, very juicy, and very, say, expansive and shiny and nice. So that's one of the nice things we can do when we've got 4 voices, and also that's why it sounds good, because those overlapping harmonic frequencies are what makes that sound really cool. Now, there's also one more thing we can do. Well, there's lots of things we can do, but there's one more that I'm going to talk about that we can do with 4 voices. That's seventh chords. So the other type of chord that we can sing with 4 voices is called seventh chords. So a seventh chord is a 4-part chord, so 4 different pitches, consisting of scale degrees 1, 3, 5, and 7, maybe with some accidentals. So what does that mean? Well, it just means, for example, if you were to take the note C, then you have the notes C, E, G, and B, because it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Right, that's 1, 3, 5, and 7. And possibly with some sharps and flats on there. But the important thing is there's some flavour of C, some flavour of E, some flavour of G, and some flavour of B, which makes us a 7th chord. Now, why do we care about 7th chords? It's a good question. So, if you remember, the first 6 harmonics in the harmonic series, that's how we came up with our major triad, right? We found that C, E, and G in those first 6 harmonics of the note C. Now, if we go to our 7th harmonic, we find a note not in the major triad, and this is the minor 7th of the scale. So if you look here, if you look at the C, so the first six notes in the harmonic series of C, that was where we found our major triad. We have just C's, E's, and G's. We go to that 7th note, and we've got a B flat. Yeah, that's our minor 7th. So we add that on to our major triad, and we get a new funky chord. So the chord built from those harmonics has many, many names. We're going to call it the dominant 7th chord. If you're a barbershopper, you might call it the barbershop chord or the barbershop 7. Classical musicians might call it the major minor 7. We're going to call it the dominant 7. Now, there's kind of good reason why it's called the dominant 7, but I probably haven't got time to completely go through that today. So, we've got our dominant 7 chord, and we've found the pitches from the harmonic series. And the dominant 7 chord is special for 2 reasons. So the first one is it's an excellent harmonic amplifier, because all the pitches are in the harmonic series of the root. So I'll play you now that barbershop chord, that dominant 7 chord, and just listen to how nicely these pitches sort of lock in with each other, and how kind of, how nice and ringing it sounds. So it's an excellent harmonic amplifier, because like how we just basically picked the 3 notes in the harmonic series for our major triad, we just pick the next one, stick it on there, and there's our dominant 7th chord. And this chord is also really important in harmonization. So there's loads and loads and loads of ways we can use this chord, and it's been used for years. So you can go back to the 1600s and you can hear this chord. It's one of the most important chords even today in pop and jazz and barbershop. You know, you can find examples of Chopin, Mozart, Handel, Bach, all these guys using this chord. It's so important. And yeah, it's also used in jazz, in pop, and everything. So here's sort of another flavour of that exact same chord, but this is now in a different version. And listen to how kind of, I guess, exciting this one sounds. Yeah, and compare that to the other voicing of the same chord. So barbershop 7 is a really, really versatile chord, and that's why we love it so much in barbershop. It's because we get that lock and ring sound, because those are the 4 notes that are in the harmonic series. So that's why it rings nicely. But also, there's loads of ways we can use it for our harmony. Now, again, I haven't got time to get into barbershop harmony, but Dr. David Wright is going to be talking about that, which I'm very, very excited about. So we're kind of almost there now with this session. So we can just now have a brief recap of what we've spoken about. So we spoke about pitches, and in particular we spoke about frequency, and about harmonics, and about sound waves. And the important thing was, if you remember, pitches. These are just frequencies. Every pitch is a frequency, and higher frequency is higher pitch, lower frequency is lower pitch. And we spoke about the harmonic series and the fact that the human voice has a load of extra sounds sort of floating around on top of it when we sing. This is the harmonic series. And we also spoke about using different vowels and singing resonantly to maximize those harmonics for good singing. We spoke about intervals. So we started off thinking about ratios and the difference of a consonant and a dissonant interval. So if you remember, a perfect fifth was a ratio of 3 to 2. And that meant that we had loads of harmonics that were overlapping between those notes. And that's why that perfect fifth sounded so nice. And if you contrast that to the tritone, that was really ugly ratio, and that's why the interval sounds ugly, because there's pretty much no overlapping between the two going on. So when the two waves in that interval interfere, it made that ugly pattern that we saw earlier. And we spoke about tuning. So we spoke about the math problems that are posed when we try and tune everything by those ratios. So the example I gave was when we have 3 major thirds. If we use the ratio we know for major thirds, then we should get an octave. What we get is a flat octave. We get something that sounds like this. It's not quite right, is it? Is what we want. Not. It's just a little bit off. So we have that compromise of equal temperament, which we spoke about. And we also spoke about how we try to not use equal temperament when we're ringing chords. We try to always use our ears and actually tune based on the note we're hearing. And that means the different notes actually have slightly different frequencies depending on what chord you're singing and what position they are in the chord. We spoke about triads. We spoke about inversions and the various stability of those inversions. So if you remember, the root position was the most stable, followed by the second inversion and finally the first inversion. And we also spoke about chord spellings. So if you remember, we like having the third on top of a major chord because that allows maximum harmonic amplification. And finally, we spoke about 4-part chords. So we spoke about octavization. We spoke about 7th chords, and in particular about dominant 7 chords. About how these chords are just taken straight from the harmonic series, and that's why they have that beautiful lock and ring sound to them. Cool. So now we're going to put all of that together into one final example. So you may recognize these 4 gentlemen. These are 4 gentlemen from Sweden, known as ringmasters. They're a BHS champion quartet, and they're very, very good at singing. And we're going to listen to them just singing a little bit. So listen for a few things. So A, listen to the way that they all sing so resonantly. They're maximizing the harmonics in their voices by singing with resonance. And that means that because they're singing in harmony, their harmony sounds really bloody good. Because all those frequencies are overlapping. They're also singing those nice chords we spoke about, those major chords and those dominant 7 chords. And that's why they're ringing. And they're singing chords in good inversions with good chord spellings. So let's just listen to them and think about all the things we've spoken about in this session are all present in this example. So we'll just listen to them. So enjoy this. I think they sound really bloody awesome.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so that lovely, lovely resonant singing, those chords locking in, all of that sounds so, so good. But why does it sound good? Well, we know now it's because of the science. It's all because of waves, it's because of pitches, and it's because of maths. And that, I think, is the beautiful thing. So.
Mark.
I will leave it there on that lovely chord. So basically, the only thing now that I've got left to say to you is thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time to watch this session. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I hope it was enjoyable and interesting and made sense. If you do have any questions, I'm going to be running some drop-in sessions over the weekend about music theory and that sort of stuff. So feel free to just pop in, ask me any questions, shoot me a message, whatever, and I'll hopefully reply to you. And then the only thing left to say is that I really hope you're having a great weekend. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon in a Zoom room. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for spending the last 50 minutes or so with me. I hope that was enjoyable and helpful, and have a great time at Collective College. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye for now.